Usually when we talk about a military victory, there's this expectation of grand strategic maneuvering. We tend to view history from 1,000 feet up.
Oh, absolutely. Like moving pieces on a board.
Right. You move a corps here, you flank with cavalry there, and the historian just points at a sweeping arrow on a map and says, there's the brilliant stroke.
It's clean. It's safe.
Exactly. We like our history to be clean, easily categorized into brilliant generals and flawed doctrines, but real war isn't like that.
No, it is entirely comforting to view war as a massive game of chess because it implies order. But when you zoom in, when you step down into the mud and the blood of actual close-quarters combat, that neat chessboard is completely upended.
Yeah, those sweeping arrows disappear pretty fast.
They vanish. You are no longer looking at topographical arrows. You are looking at terrifying, murky waters. The neat lines disappear, and you're left with terrified men trying to survive the next 30 seconds.
Which brings us to the reality of the Battle of Culloden, fought in 1746. And today, we are doing a deep dive into a tactical landscape that is incredibly murky.
Very much so,
Well,
especially regarding the legendary new bayonet drill.
right. And to even attempt to parse the truth from the myths here, we have to acknowledge the foundation of our entire investigation. Every piece of terrain analysis, every synthesis of primary sources, all of it comes directly from a profound research study by Mick Prechter at battlefieldtravels.com.
Yeah, his work is phenomenal.
It really is. He combines firsthand exploration of the actual battlefield with sophisticated GIS terrain analysis. It's basically a masterpiece of tactical investigation.
And honestly, that level of granular, ground-up research is the only way to tackle the deeply ingrained historical debates surrounding Culloden.
Right.
It forces us to ask a question that changes how we view 18th century warfare for you, the listener. How does a mighty little alteration in the physical mechanics of holding a weapon completely change the outcome of a war?
A mighty little alteration.
Yes.
I love that phrasing.
It's perfect, right? And perhaps even more intriguingly, why did modern historians spend decades looking for the absolute wrong kind of proof to understand it?
That is the core of the mystery today. Because this isn't just a story about, the geometry of a bayonet on the end of a wooden stock.
No, not at all.
We are looking at the psychology of combat, the neurology of muscle memory, and, well, the unforgiving reality of a terrifying enemy charge.
To understand the solution, we have to vividly understand the nightmare the British government army was facing in the autumn of 1745 and the winter of 1746.
We really need to dissect the complete tactical collapse caused by the Highland charge.
And collapse is almost too gentle a word. I mean, by the time these armies met on the boggy moor of Culloden in April 1746, Charles Edward Stuart's Jacobite army had already humiliated the British government forces.
Humiliated is right. They seized Edinburgh.
Yes, they marched into England and inflicted two catastrophic defeats on government troops, first at Prestonpans in September 1745, and then at Falkirk Muir in January 1746.
And we are not talking about orderly strategic retreats here.
Oh no, we are talking about the total disintegration of formed infantry.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when you say disintegration, how fast are we actually talking? These were veteran British troops.
Highly trained. Veterans of the War of the Austrian Succession in Flanders.
Right, so it takes a massive psychological shock to completely shatter a veteran line.
Well, at Prestonpans, Sir John Coates' government army ceased to exist as a fighting force in about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
That's barely enough time to realize you're in a battle.
Exactly. Picture the environment for a second. The government commanders had literally written off a local drainage ditch as impassable, so they anchored their flank on it.
Big mistake.
Massive mistake. The Jacobite army crossed that ditch in the pitch black. They formed up on the government's eastern flank, and when first light broke, the field was covered in a thick mist.
Oh, wow. So you can't even see them.
Right. The psychological terror of hearing an army before you can see it cannot be overstated. Out of that mist came the Highland charge.
So what did the British infantry do?
They managed to fire a single ragged volley, just one. The sheer speed and aggression of the impact shattered them. The infantry broke. The dragoons wheeled their horses and fled the field without even engaging the enemy.
Wow. And the casualty disparity from that 10-minute span is just staggering.
It's totally lopsided.
The Jacobites lost, maybe 30 men, while the government army saw roughly 300 killed and wounded, and another 1,500 taken prisoner.
An entire army swept off the map.
Swept away.
Mm-hmm.
And then at Falkirk Muir, a few months later, under Lieutenant General Henry Hawley, The nightmare repeats itself.
Yeah, 3 infantry regiments broke and ran the absolute second the Highland charge crested the ridge.
Which means we cannot dismiss the Highland charge as just, a mob of yelling men swinging swords.
No, that's a huge myth. It was a specific, highly lethal tactical system tailored perfectly to destroy linear European infantry.
So let's look at the loadout of the Jacobite Highlander. What are they carrying?
Well, they carried a musket, a pair of pistols, a heavy basket-hilt claymore sword, and this is the absolute linchpin of their entire system, the targe.
The targe. This is the mechanism that breaks the British doctrine.
Yes.
For those who don't know, this was a round wooden shield, usually covered in tough leather, reinforced with brass studs. And it was worn tightly on the left forearm.
Right, and it wasn't just defensive armor, it was an offensive tool.
And that tool perfectly exploited the fatal flaw in the British government army's training.
Which was incredibly rigid. I mean, the British infantry were highly trained professionals, but they were conditioned for linear warfare.
Spanning in perfectly dressed lines.
Exactly. At regulation distances, delivering controlled, rolling volley fire against French or Spanish soldiers who fought in the exact same manner.
It's symmetrical warfare. You expect the guy across from you to be holding a musket with 2 hands, just like you are.
Exactly. But the entire British Manual of Arms, specifically Major General Humphrey Bland's Treatise of Military Discipline.
The 5th edition from 1743, right?
Yes. That manual was utterly useless the moment a Highlander closed the distance with a shield.
Let's walk through what Bland's manual actually instructed a soldier to do, because the biomechanics of it are fascinating and, well, ultimately fatal.
The order given is, charge your bayonets breast high.
Right, and the manual breaks this down into precise motions. You hold the firelock, the musket fast with your left hand, placing the palm of your right hand on the butt end.
You step back with your right foot.
Yep, you bring the musket to a level position, supporting that heavy barrel with your left arm. The bayonet is pointed directly to the front, breast high.
And then comes the crucial, fatal command. Push your bayonets.
Push your bayonets. You thrust the musket with both hands straight forward, directly into the chest of the man standing exactly opposite you.
Straight ahead. That is the key flaw. The doctrine assumes the target is an exposed chest. But, as noted by a correspondent in the Gentleman's Magazine, Volume 15, in October 1745, the Highlanders didn't play by those rules.
No, they didn't.
They would fire their muskets at about 30 yards, throw the empty firearms to the ground, draw their broadswords, and sprint the final distance with the targe raised.
I want to propose a purely military analogy to illustrate why Bland's drill was a death sentence.
Go for it.
Imagine an unarmored spearman going up against a Roman legionary carrying a massive curved scutum shield.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
And the spearman's only permitted move, like drilled into his muscle memory, is to thrust perfectly straight ahead into the thickest, most reinforced center of that shield.
They're gonna hit a wall.
It's a fatal geometric mismatch. The targe is already positioned, covering the Highlander's chest and entire left side.
And that geometry guarantees the British soldier's defeat. Think about it. He thrusts an 11-pound musket straight forward. The Highlander simply angles the targe to catch and deflect the bayonet point to the left.
Instantly, the British soldier's weapon is offline.
Exactly. And the momentum of his own thrust pitches his balance forward. His entire front, his chest and neck are completely exposed.
While the Highlander's right arm, the one holding the heavy basket-hilt claymore, is entirely unobstructed.
He has a completely free swing at an off-balance, unprotected man. It's butchery.
Absolute butchery. And what makes this so profoundly terrifying for the British ranks is that they hadn't faced shield-bearing infantry in centuries.
Right, the last time a British army dealt with massed shield combat was the medieval era. It was entirely outside their institutional memory.
So they literally had no modern framework for it, which is why the core problem the Duke of Cumberland inherited wasn't just, a flawed page in a training manual.
No, it was a complete psychological collapse.
When Cumberland was dispatched north to take command after the disaster at Falkirk, he found an army that had lost its moral spine.
They had zero confidence in their primary weapon. Zero confidence in their officers' tactics.
Because they knew that if the Highlanders survived the musket volleys and closed the distance, the manual offered them no way to survive.
When soldiers realize their doctrine is essentially a suicide pact, panic is the only rational response.
Yeah, if you know you cannot win the melee, you don't stick around for the melee. You drop your weapon and run.
And that contagion of panic is what Cumberland had to cure. He had to prove to a terrified 18-year-old infantryman that a disciplined soldier with a bayonet could physically survive a charging Highlander with a sword and shield.
And that psychological restoration is the entire purpose of the 6-week incubation period at Aberdeen, right?
Exactly. Cumberland arrives in Edinburgh in January 1746, assesses the shattered morale, and immediately moves the army north to Aberdeen.
So they are there from March to April 1746, undergoing this relentless, intensive preparation before advancing into the Highlands.
6 weeks to solve a tactical puzzle that had already destroyed 2 armies?
Cumberland approaches this in layers, though. He doesn't just invent a new bayonet move on day one.
No, he starts with firepower. Because the absolute safest way to stop a charge is to make sure the enemy never reaches your bayonets in the first place.
Right. So he completely overhauls the platoon firing sequences.
Yes, we have a specific order from April 2nd issued to the Royal Scots Fusiliers. It directs them to use alternate firings by platoons from the right and left to the center, while explicitly reserving the fire of the front rank and the grenadiers.
Because the traditional firing method often resulted in everyone discharging their weapons simultaneously.
Right. Massive initial impact, but terrible aftermath.
Yeah, it leaves the entire line spending the next 20 seconds frantically trying to reload with black powder and ramrods while heavily armed swordsmen are sprinting at them.
So Cumberland's modified rolling fire created a continuous unbroken wall of lead to shatter the momentum of the charge.
But firepower alone is a fragile defense. I mean, what if the weather turns?
Exactly. Look at Falkirk. A heavy storm soaked the gunpowder there, turning the muskets into expensive wooden clubs.
Or what if the Highlanders just, absorb the horrific casualties and keep running? The government troops still needed a physical answer for the moment the enemy got within arm's reach.
They needed a script for the melee.
And this is where the psychological brilliance of the Aberdeen training comes into focus. There's this striking anecdote recorded by a grenadier in Barrel's regiment.
Oh, yes, cited later in an 1802 pamphlet.
Right. During the daily exercises in the Aberdeen Flood, the grenadiers were ordered to mock attack the infantry battalions using broadswords.
They were actively simulating the terror of the Highland charge against their own comrades.
It's literally exposure therapy with live steel.
That's exactly what it is. Because when you are terrified, your prefrontal cortex shuts down. Higher-level cognitive reasoning evaporates.
You default to whatever action is drilled deepest into your muscle memory.
By practicing against broadswords over and over, Cumberland was taking an apocalyptic, paralyzing threat and reducing it to a solvable mechanical sequence.
He was rewiring their panic response, giving a frightened soldier a highly specific physical task to execute the moment the enemy closes in, gives him a sense of agency.
If you drill that physical sequence 10,000 times, the muscle memory takes over before the terror can set in.
But how that new drill was actually transmitted to the troops is a massive point of contention among modern historians.
Oh, it's a huge debate. Critics constantly point out that there is no written general order in Cumberland's headquarters papers detailing a change to Bland's manual.
They treat the absence of a piece of paper as proof that the drill never existed.
Which fundamentally misreads 18th century command culture. And frankly, human nature.
Yeah, you don't hand a traumatized infantryman a memo and expect him to feel better.
Cumberland understood that. We have John Marchant writing that very same year in 1746, stating explicitly that Cumberland, quote, took the pains to confer with every battalion afoot on the proper method of using the musket and bayonet to advantage against the sword and target.
And Andrew Henderson wrote in 1752 that Cumberland had carefully instructed them in this way since the time he first put himself at the head of the troops.
Because the transmission of micro-tactical adjustments in a pre-industrial army was deeply personal, it was oral.
Right. A commanding general standing in the mud, personally taking a musket, and visually demonstrating a survivable technique to a battalion of terrified men leaves a profound mark on the survivors.
It is leadership in its purest form. But unfortunately for modern skeptics, it does not generate an administrative file for an archive.
So we have to look at the actual mechanics of the innovation. What was this mighty little alteration that Cumberland demonstrated?
Well, to bypass the cars, you have to bypass the man holding it.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The brilliance of the new drill lies in a shift of geometry. Under Bland's doctrine, the soldier is locked onto the man directly in front of him.
Symmetrical.
Right. The new drill completely broke that symmetry. It instructed the British soldier to ignore the Highlander charging directly at him.
Which goes against every instinct.
Totally. Instead, he was to thrust his bayonet obliquely at a sharp diagonal angle, targeting the exposed right side of the Highlander who was attacking the soldier to his right.
Let's strip away the military terminology for a second and picture the spatial reality of this. You are an infantryman in the battle line. A Highlander is sprinting straight at you.
And his targe is up on his left arm, covering his chest and his left side.
Right. He is heavily protected from the front. But look at the Highlander running at the comrade standing to your right. That Highlander is raising his right arm to swing his heavy broadsword.
And the human body has limitations. When you raise your right arm high to deliver a downward strike, you pull your ribs, your armpit, and your entire right flank completely open.
The targe cannot protect the right flank when the sword arm is raised. It is an anatomical impossibility.
The new drill weaponized the Highlander's own offensive momentum. Instead of wasting your thrust on the thick wood and leather shield of the man fronting you, you thrust diagonally to your right.
You bury your bayonet into the completely exposed ribs of the man attacking your comrade.
And the comrade to your left. He is thrusting diagonally to his right, hitting the exposed flank of the man attacking you.
It is an overlapping chain of mutual defense. It is brutally simple.
But finding that simple solution required cutting through a lot of incredibly bad ideas.
Oh, man. Yes. Mick Prichter's research unearthed a proposal from the January 1746 Gentleman's Magazine, Volume 16, that perfectly captures how utterly detached civilian theory was from the chaos of the battlefield.
The civilian merchant's proposal? It is a fascinating study in impracticality.
This wealthy Scottish merchant believed he had solved the tactical crisis. He proposed a totally unique discipline to defeat the targe, which involved modifying the leather sling on the musket.
He wanted the soldier to lengthen the sling, wrap it around himself to support the musket's weight, and use his left hand to push the musket forward like a battering ram under the Highlander's right arm.
And while doing this, the soldier would hold a short sword in his right hand to parry the broadsword.
That's absurd.
I read this and couldn't help but laugh at the sheer physical comedy of it. A Brown Bess musket is 6 feet long with the bayonet attached, and it weighs 11 pounds.
The merchant was asking an exhausted, terrified soldier, slick with sweat and rain, to perfectly aim an 11-pound polearm with his non-dominant hand, while simultaneously engaging in a complex sword duel with his dominant hand against a larger, heavier blade.
It's like asking an artilleryman to fire a cannon with one hand while fencing with the other.
That's a perfect way to put it. Under the massive adrenaline spike of close combat, fine motor skills and complex asymmetrical coordination completely evaporate.
Yeah, the human brain cannot process that level of multitasking when a man is screaming at you with an axe.
A tactic designed for the melee must be gross motor dominant. It has to survive the loss of dexterity that comes with panic.
And Cumberland's solution, a simple pivot of the hips and a diagonal thrust, is robust. It relies on the large muscles of the back and arms, not the fine coordination of the wrists.
However, the exact footwork of this diagonal thrust leads to another fascinating mechanical debate, the reversed stance hypothesis.
Right. Dr. David Blackmore proposed this in his 2012 thesis.
The standard stance for a right-handed soldier firing a musket is left foot forward, left hand supporting the heavy barrel, right hand on the trigger.
So Blackmore suggests that to execute this severe diagonal thrust to the right, the soldiers might have been drilled to completely reverse their bodies.
Yes, they would stand right foot forward, right hand near the muzzle, left hand on the butt plate, with their bodies facing left and their weapons pointing right.
From a purely biomechanical standpoint, thrusting powerfully to your right is much easier if your right foot is forward.
Absolutely. But the cognitive load of this is immense. Every time a soldier picked up a tool or a weapon in his life, he favored his master eye and master hand.
Furthermore, he's just fired 3 rolling volleys using his standard left foot forward stance.
The smoke is blinding, the noise is deafening, the Highlanders are 20 yards away.
Overriding a lifetime of muscle memory in that split second to physically reverse your hand positions on a heavy weapon is an incredibly demanding task.
It sounds almost impossibly difficult to execute under fire.
But as we dig into the contemporary evidence, there is visual proof that suggests this massive physical shift might have actually occurred.
We aren't just speculating on body mechanics here. We have to build an investigative evidence board based on the documents and images produced by the people who were actually there, or who documented it immediately afterward.
And the sheer convergence of this evidence is what makes the dismissal by modern critics so baffling.
Let's start with the written evidence. Our primary source comes from the April 1746 edition of the Scots Magazine.
published the exact same month as the Battle of Culloden.
Right. The printers dedicated 16 full pages to dissecting the battle, and within that coverage are two independent letters that appear to originate from members of Barrel's regiment.
And Barrel's regiment is the absolute epicenter of this tactical case study.
Yes, due to the boggy terrain on the battlefield, the Highland charge was funneled directly into the far left of the British line.
Barrel's regiment bore the absolute brunt of the hand-to-hand combat. They are the most vital witnesses we have.
So the first letter in the magazine provides the mechanical breakdown. The writer uses the phrase, "The alteration was mighty little, but of the last consequence."
And then he explicitly details the geometry we just discussed.
Right. He states clearly that instead of attacking the swordman fronting him, the soldier's bayonet attacked the sword fronting his next right-hand man. The letter perfectly outlines the vulnerability of the raised sword arm.
Then you have the second letter from a different correspondent in the same unit. This writer focuses on the brutal outcome of the new practice.
He states that the British soldiers became much too hard for the swords and that they killed 10 men to their 1 in this kind of fighting.
A 10-to-1 kill ratio in a close quarters melee is just an astonishing statistic.
It is. In standard 18th century linear combat, melees were typically brief, chaotic, and resulted in roughly equal casualties until one side's morale broke.
For a single regiment to stand fast and slaughter an attacking force at a 10-to-1 ratio suggests they possessed an overwhelming systemic tactical advantage.
The Jacobites discovered their primary method of shock combat was suddenly completely neutralized. The letters describe them pausing, retreating a little, and then finally breaking and fleeing in total disarray.
And we don't just have to take the magazine's word for it. We can cross-reference that slaughter with the official government dispatches.
10 days after the battle, on April 26, 1746, the London Gazette published Cumberland's official dispatch.
It notes specifically that Barrel's regiment and the left of Monroe's regiment fairly beat them with their bayonets.
And the dispatch includes the incredible detail that there was scarcely a single soldier or officer in those specific units who didn't kill 1 or 2 men, each with their bayonets and spontoons, which are the pole arms carried by the officers.
Now, the London Gazette does not outline the biomechanics of the drill. Official dispatches rarely care about the how.
No, but it absolutely confirms the unprecedented close-quarter killing rate that the Scots Magazine attributes to the new technique.
The independent sources interlock perfectly. One describes the mechanism, the other verifies the bloody result.
But the most compelling piece of the puzzle isn't a letter at all. It brings us back to that reverse stance hypothesis we discussed earlier.
Yes, we have to look at the Augustin Heckel engraving. Created in 1747, just 1 year after the smoke cleared at Culloden.
It is currently held by the National Gallery of Scotland, and it is a vital document.
Heckel was a highly prominent, meticulous engraver working in the London art scene.
His depiction of Culloden became incredibly popular, largely because it captured the intense, chaotic reality of the event.
If you examine the foreground of this engraving, he focuses heavily on the desperate hand-to-hand combat on the British left flank. Let's picture the detail Heckel carved into this plate.
In the immediate foreground, you see the soldiers of Barrel's regiment locked in mortal combat.
And Heckel has meticulously depicted these specific men using a reversed bayonet stance.
Their right foot is planted forward, their left foot is back, their right hand is pushed forward near the muzzle of the musket, and their left hand is braced back against the butt plate.
Their bodies are facing to the left, but they are thrusting powerfully to their right.
And the detail that elevates this from artistic license to historical evidence is found right next to them.
Monroe's regiment.
Exactly. Heckel drew Monroe's regiment immediately adjacent to Barrel's, but he depicted the men of Monroe's regiment fighting in the standard regulation bland stance.
Left foot forward, left hand forward, thrusting straight ahead. This is the visual smoking gun.
Why on earth would an engraver sitting in a London studio a year after the battle draw 2 adjacent infantry units engaged in the exact same phase of close combat, using 2 demonstrably different, highly specific physical stances?
He wouldn't invent that asymmetry out of thin air. Breaking the visual uniformity of a military formation goes against every convention of 18th century heroic art.
Heckel clearly consulted with knowledgeable veterans to ensure the accuracy of the terrain, the bog, and the unit positions.
It is overwhelmingly probable that a veteran of the left wing explicitly briefed him on the mechanics of the fight.
Someone told him, "Barrel's regiment took the worst of it, and they fought like this, reversing their stance to hit the flank, while the units further down the line fought conventionally."
It is the visual manifestation of the mighty little alteration. It shows the innovation applied exactly where the historical record says the fighting was thickest.
Yet despite the April 1746 letters, despite the 10-to-1 kill ratio verified by the London Gazette, despite Henderson's 1752 account, and despite Heckel's meticulous engraving,
A massive contingent of modern historians flatly refuse to believe the new drill ever existed.
it's wild. Their skepticism is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of evidence, and it all traces back to a single sentence published 7 months after the battle.
In November 1746, the Scots Magazine published an anonymous retraction.
It was brief and entirely devoid of context.
It simply stated, "We are likewise informed that there is no foundation for what was said, page 193, of an alteration having been made in the manner of using the bayonet."
That one sentence is the entire foundation of the modern skeptic's argument.
It is unnamed. The authority of whoever informed them is completely unknown.
And most glaringly, the retraction only cites page 193 of the April edition. It completely ignores the letter on page 192, the one that provided the explicit mechanical description of the diagonal thrust.
It only attempts to discredit the letter about the kill ratio.
Modern historians have inexplicably allowed this flimsy, unsourced, partial retraction to outweigh a mountain of corroborating primary evidence.
When you actually apply rigorous military logic to the critics' arguments, their case completely falls apart. Let's dismantle them systematically, starting with their favorite crutch.
Right. Critic Argument 1 states that because there is no general order in Cumberland's headquarters papers, the drill is a myth.
We touched on this, but the logic is so flawed it requires deeper analysis. The absence of an administrative document is not the absence of a historical event.
These historians are treating combat adaptation like a corporate audit.
Exactly. A commanding general walking a muddy line in Aberdeen, grabbing a musket, and physically showing his battalion commanders a new thrust angle does not require paperwork.
Assuming that unwritten history is fake history completely ignores the reality of field command. It ignores the urgency of the situation.
Cumberland wasn't writing a new manual for the War Office in London. He was trying to keep the men in front of him alive for the next month.
Now, Critic Argument 2 is even more bizarre.
Oh, this one is ridiculous.
Skeptics argue that after the Battle of Culloden, government forces recovered fewer than 190 broadswords from the roughly 1,500 Jacobite casualties.
Since most Highlanders had muskets, not swords, critics claim Cumberland wouldn't have bothered inventing a drill to counter a weapon that wasn't overwhelmingly present on the field.
That is a staggering logical fallacy. Mick Prichter perfectly identifies this as a temporal inversion.
A temporal inversion. It is judging a past decision using future data.
Right. Cumberland's army was drilling in Aberdeen in March. Their training was entirely dictated by the horrific trauma they experienced at Prestonpans and Falkirk, where the sword and targe had slaughtered them.
They did not possess clairvoyance. They had no way of knowing that a month later at Culloden, many Highlanders would drop their swords, lose them in the bog, or leave them behind due to severe supply issues and exhaustion.
You train for the worst-case scenario that has already killed your comrades.
Using an inventory of swords taken in late April to debunk a training regimen implemented in March is absurd. You can't use the aftermath of a battle to prove what people were thinking before it happened.
Precisely the point. Moving to Critic Argument 3, skeptics heavily rely on David Morier's famous painting, an incident in the rebellion of 1745.
Painted in 1753, commissioned by Cumberland himself.
The painting depicts British grenadiers holding the line against the Jacobites, and the grenadiers are clearly using the standard, straight-ahead, bland bayonet drill.
So the critics look at this and say, Cumberland commissioned this painting, it shows the old drill, therefore the new drill is a myth.
This argument fundamentally misunderstands the purpose of 18th century art.
A massive commemorative oil painting designed to hang in a palace is not a tactical training manual.
No. Morier was hired to paint a heroic, sweeping, propagandistic depiction of stoic British discipline triumphing over wild rebellion.
The mighty little alteration we are discussing is a gritty, physically awkward mechanic. A severe diagonal thrust or a fully reversed stance looks chaotic and asymmetrical.
An artist commissioned to paint a glorifying portrait of the Army's discipline is naturally going to depict the men in the clean, regulation, parade ground posture that defined European military ideals.
You cannot use stylized heroic art to disprove micro-tactical body mechanics documented by the men who actually bled in the mud.
Which brings us to critic argument 4, and this is where the skeptics really reveal a lack of understanding regarding combat psychology.
They argue that no soldier, in the absolute terror of a melee, would willingly expose his own front to thrust at a flanking target, entirely trusting the man next to him to protect his life.
That objection is genuinely stunning because it demonstrates a complete unfamiliarity with the foundational doctrine of infantry combat.
Right. For over 3,000 years, the core tenet of linear warfare is that the individual soldier does not fight as an isolated individual.
He fights as a connected, interdependent cell within a formation. Mick Prichter's study brilliantly brings Thucydides into this discussion.
It's the exact same principle behind enfilade machine gun theory in World War I.
Exactly.
You don't set up a machine gun to fire straight ahead at the men charging directly at your trench. You lock the gun at an angle, firing across the front of the unit next to you, while their machine gun fires across your front.
Overlapping fields of fire.
Trusting your neighbor to cover your flank while you cover his is the literal definition of infantry discipline. Claiming an 18th century British regular wouldn't do it is to ignore the entire history of organized warfare.
And that leads naturally into the final major skeptical point, critic argument 5. The critics assume that the new drill required a level of geometric precision that is physically impossible under the chaotic conditions of a melee.
So what does this all mean? They picture a neat, orderly parade ground where every British soldier pairs up perfectly with an advancing Highlander, and everyone pivots exactly 30 degrees on command.
Combat is never that clean. The Highland charge didn't hit the British line as a perfectly dressed uniform wave.
By the time they reached Barrel's regiment, the charge was ragged. It had been shredded by grape shot and rolling musket volleys.
They were hitting the British line as terrifying, disjointed clusters of individuals.
The new drill didn't require protractors and perfect parade ground angles. It required a simple, survivable biomechanical principle.
We discussed the anatomy earlier. When a Highlander reaches the line and raises his heavy broadsword to deliver a killing blow, his right side naturally and unavoidably opens up.
The geometry takes care of itself. The British soldier didn't have to calculate an angle. He just had to be trained to aggressively exploit that natural gaping opening.
Complexity dies upon contact with the enemy. This was brutally simple. See the arm go up, thrust into the exposed ribs.
When you look at the entirety of this investigation, the failure of modern skeptics becomes glaringly obvious. They failed because they approached a tactical crisis like an administrative audit.
They asked, is there a piece of paper signed by the Duke of War ordering a new drill? And when the filing cabinet was empty, they closed the book.
They asked the wrong questions.
The question they should have asked is about the probability of adaptation. Consider the grim reality of this situation.
You have a professional army that has been utterly humiliated, broken twice, by a highly specific, unique tactical system, the sword and targe.
They are sitting in the freezing mud of Aberdeen for 6 weeks, doing nothing but intensive training.
And the officer corps is highly educated. These men read Vegetius, they study Thucydides, they understand human anatomy and tactical geometry.
Are we really supposed to believe that these veteran officers and terrified men just sat in the mud for 6 weeks doing absolutely nothing, blindly hoping the Highlanders wouldn't charge the next time?
Obviously not. Or is it overwhelmingly more probable that they devised a simple, robust modification to their baseline manual to counter the specific weapon that was butchering them?
We have to weigh the evidence objectively. We have 2 independent eyewitness letters from April 1746 detailing the mechanics and the unprecedented 10-to-1 kill ratio.
We have Andrew Henderson's account in 1752. We have Richard Rolt's writings in 1767.
We have the London Gazette confirming the sheer scale of the close-quarters slaughter.
We have the Augustin Heckel engraving providing meticulous visual proof of the reversed stances in the exact regiment that saw the heaviest fighting.
And we have the massive, undeniable tactical necessity of an army desperate to survive.
You weigh all of that staggering convergence of evidence against one anonymous, unspecific, one-sentence magazine retraction published 7 months later.
The probability is beyond a reasonable doubt.
The Duke of Cumberland, through personal, urgent oral instruction, taught his traumatized men a new way to fight, and that mighty little alteration in how they pushed their bayonets broke the Highland charge forever.
This entire investigation raises an important question, an almost haunting question that extends far beyond the moors of Culloden.
How much of our accepted military history is fundamentally skewed?
How much of the past is misunderstood simply because historians prioritize neat, orderly administrative paperwork over the messy, unwritten, desperate adaptations made by terrified soldiers just trying to survive on the ground?
It makes you wonder how many other brilliant tactical innovations have been erased from our memory because they weren't filed in triplicate at headquarters.
History isn't just what was written down by the clerks, it is what was desperately learned in the mud.
And that is the true value of looking past the grand strategy and down into the mechanics of survival. I want to sincerely thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We've covered immense ground today, from the terrifying mist of Preston pans to the precise biomechanics of a bayonet thrust.
And none of this clarity would be possible without the profound investigative work of Mick Prichter at battlefieldtravels.com.
His dedication to layering GIS terrain analysis over primary source synthesis and physical battlefield exploration is essential for anyone who wants to move past the historical myths and actually understand the brutal mechanics of these engagements.
I highly encourage you to visit battlefieldtravels.com. You can access his full, exhaustive Battle of Culloden study there, along with hundreds of other extensive battle and campaign studies that peel back the layers of military history, just like we did today.
Once you understand the reality of the mud, you will never look at a heroic painting or a neat historical summary the same way again.
Until next time, keep questioning the accepted narrative.